Samuel Carter had lived on his farm for over 40 years, waking up before dawn to tend his land, just as his father and grandfather had done before him. The soil beneath his boots wasn't just dirt. It was the foundation of his family's legacy, a living testament to generations of hard work and perseverance. Every wooden beam in his barn, every furrow in the field, every tree that lined his property held a memory. His late wife, Margaret, had planted the rose bushes by the front porch, saying she wanted their home to always have a touch of beauty, no matter how hard the farm work became. Now, even years after her passing, the roses bloomed as if in defiance of time itself, just like Samuel. He had never cared for the modern world's obsession with convenience and perfection. His life was simple, honest, and real. But that simplicity was about to be threatened by people who valued power more than principles, people who believed that their money, their status, and their self-imposed rules could dictate the way others lived. And at the center of it all stood Diane Langley, the self-appointed queen of the newly built Maplewood Estates. Maplewood Estates was a luxury housing development that had cropped up just a mile down the road from Samuel's farm. The houses were pristine, with identical manicured lawns, white picket fences, and driveways filled with polished SUVs that had never seen a day of hard labor. It was the kind of neighborhood where rules were valued more than relationships, where appearance mattered more than authenticity. And at the heart of this carefully controlled community stood Diane Langley, a woman who had spent decades in corporate boardrooms, wielding power like a weapon. Retirement hadn't softened her, it had simply redirected her ambition. Now, instead of controlling a company, she controlled a community. As president of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association, Diane had made it her mission to create the perfect neighborhood, and to her, perfection didn't include an old, rugged farm spoiling the view. She had dealt with rowdy neighbors before, had forced rule breakers into compliance, had made sure that everything within her reach fell into perfect order. But Samuel Carter was about to prove that not everything could be controlled, and certainly not a man who had spent his life answering to no one but the land and his own principles. The first time Diane Langley stepped onto Samuel's property, she moved with the air of someone who believed they had already won. Dressed in an immaculate cream-colored pantsuit, carrying a clipboard filled with documents that she assumed would intimidate, she approached Samuel as he stood by his porch, sipping his morning coffee. He watched her without a word, sizing her up the same way he'd size up an approaching storm, calculating whether it would pass quickly or if he'd need to hunker down for a fight. Diane smiled, but it was the kind of smile a wolf gives before it pounces. "Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, as if she were addressing an employee rather than a landowner. "I'm Diane Langley, president of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association. I'd love to have a quick chat about some concerns regarding your property." Samuel took another slow sip of coffee, unfazed. "I don't recall my farm being part of your HOA," he replied, his voice steady, his eyes unblinking. Diane's smile barely faltered. "Well, technically, no. But your farm is directly adjacent to our community, and as I'm sure you understand, property values are a delicate thing. Aesthetic harmony is key to maintaining a high standard of living." Samuel chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "So, let me get this straight. You think my farm is bad for business?" Diane pressed her lips together before continuing, flipping through her clipboard. "We believe a few minor adjustments could make a world of difference. Perhaps repainting the barn to a more neutral color, keeping livestock further from the property line, and addressing the noise issues, your rooster, for example. Some of our residents have complained about being woken up before sunrise. I'm sure you can understand how disruptive that can be." Samuel set his coffee cup down, standing tall, his weathered hands resting on his hips. "Ma'am, this barn has been red for 50 years, and it'll stay red until it falls into the ground. As for the livestock, this is a farm, not a suburban backyard. And that rooster? That's nature waking you up, not a problem to be fixed." Diane's smile thinned. "Mr. Carter, I understand change can be difficult, but we're simply trying to create a more cohesive environment for everyone." Samuel shook his head. "No, you're trying to tell a man what to do with land that's been in his family for over a century. That's not cohesion. That's control." And I don't answer to you or your HOA. For the first time, a flicker of frustration crossed Diane's face, but she quickly masked it. Very well, she said smoothly, tucking her clipboard under her arm. I hope you reconsider, Mr. Carter. It would be a shame if this became complicated. With that, she turned on her heel and walked back toward her polished SUV, leaving behind the faintest scent of expensive perfume and unwarranted arrogance. Samuel watched her go, shaking his head. He had dealt with droughts, storms, and failing crops. He had fought tooth and nail to keep his farm alive. If Diane Langley thought she could intimidate him with a clipboard and a fake smile, she was in for a rude awakening. The war began in earnest the very next week. At first, it was small things. Letters tucked into his mailbox, each one written on official-looking Maplewood Estates letterhead, outlining community concerns and requesting compliance. Samuel ignored them, tossing each one into the firewood pile without a second glance. Then came the complaints to local officials. Someone, Samuel didn't need to guess who, had filed multiple reports about supposed code violations on his farm. First, the zoning department showed up, only to find that every inch of Samuel's land was in perfect compliance. Then the health department arrived, only to confirm that his livestock were well cared for, his soil uncontaminated, his water sources clean. Each official left with nothing to report, but Samuel knew this wasn't the end. Diane wasn't just trying to inconvenience him, she was trying to break him down, piece by piece, until he surrendered. What she didn't understand was that Samuel Carter wasn't the kind of man to back down from a fight. It didn't take long for word to spread. The town was small, and nothing stayed quiet for long. Some Maplewood residents started whispering about the battle between the old farmer and the HOA president. Some saw Diane's point. After all, they'd spent good money to live in a picturesque neighborhood, and Samuel's farm, with its old barn and roaming livestock, didn't fit their polished vision. But others saw something deeper. They saw a hardworking man being bullied by a woman who had nothing better to do than enforce rules that didn't apply. They saw the injustice of a homeowners association overstepping its bounds, trying to control something that was never theirs to begin with. And more importantly, they saw a fight worth watching. Samuel wasn't just standing up for himself. He was standing up for anyone who had ever been pushed around by people who mistook money for authority. And as the battle lines were drawn, one thing became clear. Diane Langley had picked the wrong man to mess with.